Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our monthly public training session. Today is Thursday, February 16th, 2017. Our training call today is going to be on a version 2 911 caller complaint versus EMS provider findings dashboard and how that could drive a query in the version 2 analytical cube. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you where you can find our new dashboard and how it works, give a little tour of that, and then we're going to go do a cube query based on some information that we gained from the dashboard. Now, if anyone has any questions at any time, please feel free to speak up or put them into the chat window. I'm more than happy to answer those. So let's go ahead and get started here. So our Tableau reports are going to be on our website. So from our homepage, now this is our current homepage. We're expecting to have a new website shortly. But from our current homepage, you're going to want to click on Reporting Tools, and then Mouse over Reports, and then National Reports, and then you go all the way to this Access Reports button and click on that. You'll have to click through a couple of pages where you agree not to use our data improperly. And then you'll end up on this page, this national reporting page, where you can find all of our dashboards. So we have our data quality dashboard. There's the 911 call complaint dashboard that we're going to be looking at. We also have a pediatric dashboard and a cardiac arrest dashboard. So today we're going to go ahead and select this one, the 911 call complaint versus EMS provider findings dashboard. So this is a little picture of what it looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and open it up here. And we can take a look at it real quick. So hopefully you all can see the dashboard now. So this is a tool that was created so that you could look at how closely the 911 complaint would match up with what EMS is finding when they arrive on the scene, and maybe how that compares to the patient's primary symptom. So for example, if there's a call for stroke, we can click on that and see how much of the time is the provider's impression stroke. So you can see for all the stroke calls, 52% of the time they actually find a patient who has had a stroke. And then we also have the symptoms as well on the side. So this works in a couple of ways. There's the first way, you can select a call complaint and see how that changes the impressions and symptoms. But you can also it also works in the other directions. You could select an impression and see how that affects the calls and the symptoms. So if we look at all seizures, we can see that most of the calls that come in where they find a seizure patient are for seizures or fainting, sick person, or an unknown problem, as well as a lot of other items with very small percentages. And then we could see that the symptoms have changed in response. Same thing with symptoms. If we go to primary symptom, wound, we're going to see traumatic injury and fall victim is the most common impression and complaint. You can also do some multi-select here. So if you wanted to know about cardiac arrest calls as well as chest pain calls, you can click on chest pain and then hold down Control and select cardiac arrest, and that will show you impressions and symptoms for just those two selections. Likewise, if you wanted to look at maybe calls where the complaint was stroke as well as the impression, you can select both of those, and it'll show you just the symptoms for those patients. So that's a little bit about how this tool works. It's really, the goal with this tool was to give the users a way to sort of get into playing with the data a little bit and maybe looking for some correlations that maybe would not have been obvious in the first place. So unless anyone has any questions about this from the get-go, I think we might have already done a training on it, so it might be familiar to some of you. So I was looking at this dashboard the other day, and I was thinking a little bit about cardiac arrest calls. So one thing I noticed is that out of all the calls where the impression was cardiac arrest, that's 1.7% of the calls, the complaints were primarily a few different things. I mean, of course, we saw 58% was cardiac arrest, but there were also a lot of other calls. So people were calling in a lot of things that weren't cardiac arrest, and EMS was arriving and seeing cardiac arrest. So I wanted to look at and see if EMS was arriving faster for calls that were for cardiac arrest and were actually cardiac arrest versus calls for other things that turned out to be cardiac arrest. So that was how I got this idea for the cube query. Since this dashboard only provides information on how complaints, impressions, and symptoms compare to each other, to get more information on the subset of patients that have cardiac arrest, we need to use a different tool. So this is where the version 2 analytical cube comes in handy. So let me go back to my presentation here. So here's a description in words of what I wanted to query. So 1.7% of calls have an impression of cardiac arrest. And only 58% of those calls had a caller complaint of cardiac arrest. So I want to know if EMS on average is arriving faster to cardiac arrests that were called in as cardiac arrests. So I went to a cube. I'm not going to demo the cube because sometimes it can take a little bit for it to load, and then I don't want to be sitting here for forever just boring you to death while the cube loads. So it's all in this presentation. So from our home page, if you go to reporting tools again, mouse over reports in the national reports, this top link right here, create a report cube, is where you can find our V2 analytical cube. If you click on that, you'll come to this page, and kind of down at the very bottom is a link to open the cube. And then just above that is the username and password. So if any of you are following along and you want to get into the cube to do this with me, you want to make sure you use Internet Explorer. Chrome will not work, Fireworks will not work, and if you're using Windows 10, Microsoft Edge, which is their new browser, also won't work. So you're going to have to open up Internet Explorer. And if you're on Windows 10 and you're having trouble finding Internet Explorer, I can give you a workaround for that if you just want to shoot me a message or an email later. I had a little bit of trouble finding Internet Explorer yesterday. So then here's the login information again. When you click on that link, a window will pop up asking you to log in. So the username is nemsispublic and the password is nemsis@tac. Now, if you're a state data manager, you probably have your own username and password that you could enter that will give you access to a few more data elements. But for what we're going to look at today, the public login is enough. So you click on Design, and then OLAP Report, and then Connect to Cube. This screen should pop up, and then you want to select Nemesis Enhanced, make default connection, and then hit OK. And that'll bring you to a page that looks like this. If any of you have used pivot tables in Excel, the structure of this, the functionality should be somewhat familiar. So for my query, I wanted to find out about scene response time. So I opened up the measures and event measures, and I went to the average EMS times and went to scene response time, and I went ahead and picked that up and dragged it down onto measures. You can also add things to measures by just clicking these check boxes. So you have the drag and drop, or you can click the check boxes. I prefer the drag and drop, so that's how I usually work in the cube. So I pulled that down onto measures, waited a second, and loaded up the average time for all calls. This is for all calls, no filtering whatsoever, everything that's in the cube. Speaking of the data in the cube, the version 2 cube has a 2+ year rolling data set, so I didn't pull the exact number of events, but there's quite a few in here. Several million, I believe. So after that, I wanted to pull down complaint onto rows so I could look at how the scene response time differed for different complaints. So I pulled that down onto rows, or you can check the box, and it added added that onto the left side of my little results pane here. Then if you click the plus button next to all, it'll open up all of the different complaints. And as you can see, there's quite a few complaints available. I didn't catch the whole list in the screenshot, but there's quite a large number of them. So the one I was looking at, cardiac arrest, is here. So for all calls for cardiac arrest, average team time is 6.5 minutes. But that wasn't exactly what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at cardiac arrest calls where the primary impression of the patient was cardiac arrest. So I have to add that to filters. So we're going to go to patient situation and grab EMS primary impression and drag it down onto filters. So this is going to add a filter tab just above the table in the results. And that's where I can select what I want to filter on. So this little blue arrow on the filter is where you go to make that selection. So if you click the blue arrow, it'll open up a little box here where you can select what impressions you want to filter on. So for my query, I want to look at just cardiac arrest patients. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one, 427.5 cardiac arrest. And then it's going to filter my table down. So for the cardiac arrest calls, the average scene response time was 6.52 minutes. So you can sort of see right here, I've just clicked that section of the table. So that's half the result, is how long it takes them to show up for a cardiac arrest call that was an actual cardiac arrest. But now I want to know how fast they show up to all the calls for cardiac arrest, how fast they show up to all the calls for a cardiac arrest patient where the call came in for something else. So I need to do a little bit more filtering. So back on my table, I've added complaint to filters. So I need to filter out complaint cardiac arrest so that I can look at all other complaints. So dragging complaint on the filter added another filter box at the top. So what I want to do is select this checkbox in the filter so that it turns into 2 checks, which means multi-select. So after I've selected that, I can select the blue arrow, and then the list pops up, and I need to select everything but cardiac arrest. So there's cardiac arrest. You got to go through and check every single one of these boxes that isn't cardiac arrest. And takes a couple minutes, a couple seconds to do. But that'll make sure I'm looking at all of the call types that were not cardiac arrest. Then I needed to take complaint reported by dispatch off the row shelf. So if I leave it on the row shelf, it's going to show me the average time for each type of call. Well, I want to know the average time for any call. So went ahead and grabbed complaint reported by dispatch and pulled it off the row shelf. And you can do that by just dragging it basically anywhere off the screen back onto the list of measures and elements or into the results window and just drop it, or you can uncheck the boxes on these lists. So after all those selections are made, the cube returns an average scene response time of 6.89 minutes. So recall that the scene response time for just cardiac calls was 6 minutes and 6.52 minutes. So the results of this is that EMS is on average 22 seconds faster for cardiac arrest patients who are called in as cardiac arrest as compared to cardiac arrest patients where the call or complaint is something different. So that was the results of my query, and this is just one way that the cube can help you explore a version 2 data set in ways that maybe some of our dashboards can't. Is there any other tools anyone has questions about, or anything someone would like to see in the cube that could open it up?
This is Sharon again. I guess when the version 3 stuff gets developed, I would probably have more questions because our data in version 2 is not as accurate as it would be in version 3. So we're kind of focusing on version 3 at this point.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, maybe I will go ahead and go to our version 3 tools, so we can maybe talk a little bit about that. So those are also under reports. I think, well, okay, I'll look at since this is our public training, we'll look at the public tools. So for version 3 public right now, we have a kind of a cool data quality dashboard here. Now, for those of you that can see the state view of the data quality dashboard, this might be valuable to you. So this dashboard shows data quality for everyone submitting under version 3 in the past week. And then there's a state version of this where you can look at your data on any time frame. So this might be useful as a comparison. So this shows kind of an overall view of data quality for February 9th to February 14th. So it's a couple of days back. So we can see that everyone's overall score is 91% for our measures of quality. And that's just on basically whether information is filled in and makes sense. So do patients have age? Do patients have a gender? If there was a patient contact, was a zip code recorded? There's some cardiac arrest elements. Valid system times. So these times have to be greater than 0. Whether a cause of injury is reported, some trauma center related questions, whether times are recorded for medications, procedures, things like that, and then some other sort of information. And then there's also sort of a graph that shows these overall and category scores for the past week. So there's a state view of this that you could maybe use to sort of compare how your state is doing to everyone, but then this public version is available kind of for everyone to see how our data quality is on version 3.
Yep, thanks for sharing that, Laurel. It's true. We're seeing a lot better quality of data with the version 3 data that we're receiving so far in comparison to version 2, and great reasons if states and EMS agencies across the nation are slowly working on their transition to the new standard.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for the feedback. If anyone has anything else, here's my email again. Please feel free to email me. We're always looking for new ideas to build interesting dashboards and tools to help everyone connect with our data, state users, local EMS users, the general public. So if there's anything that appeals to you, just please drop me an email, and we'll probably get started on it. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Laura.